Now we have discussed about reliability. We come to the next topic, which is very close to reliability, is called validity. What is this validity? Validity refers to the accuracy of the data generated by the research instrument, like an interview schedule or questionnaire or some other means of research. Validity answers questions like whether the method adopted by the researcher affects the results of the factors that should have been considered but were ignored. These answers refer to the internal validity of a researcher. Validity of a research is also about answering the question, how valid is one's conception of the situation? How generalized are one's results? So, answer to these questions refer to the external validity of your research, which can be explained as the generalized from a sample to a population. Establishing external validity for an instrument then follows directly from sampling. There is also a face validity and a content validity. Face validity means a statistical measure of validity. For example, type 1 error will require rejection of the hypothesis when it is true, and type 2 error will require acceptance of the hypothesis when it is false. The concept of hypothesis is linked here. So, if you have to understand the concept of hypothesis, you can go back to my module on hypothesis and discuss that validity part there. So, content validity, on the other hand, refers to the appropriateness of the content of an instrument. In other words, do the measure, that is questions or observation logs, etc., accurately assess what you want to know. This is particularly important with the achievement test. Consider that a test developer wants to maximize the validity of a unit test for 7th grade mathematics. This would involve taking representative questions from each of the sections of the unit and evaluating them against the desired outcomes. So, that will be called as content validity. It is easy to achieve validity in research, as one has to keep in mind the adequate sampling, precision of observation, and the subtle changes in environment and people are observed carefully. One can say that the concept of validity refers to the next extent to which the data provide a true measurement of social reality. Let's take an example from IGNOU material on research methodology of shortage of power supply. You may be quite sure of the statistics about power shortage week by week. You also have to be sure how valid or accurate a picture of power shortage in the whole town or the state is. Your statistics presents. If you were to compare your figure with those collected by a government agencies, its figure may be reliable, but the government's definition of power shortage may not be the same as is used in your research. So, if this is the case, then the two set of statistics are not valid for the purpose of comparison, because the comparison is not between two things alike and therefore research is not valid. How do we achieve validity in our research? So, this is the question that we have to answer. To bring about validity in the research process, Walcott has suggested some guidelines. They are: one should refrain from talking. When you are in the field, listen as much as possible. Secondly, produce field notes that are exact as much as possible. Begin to write early so that you will not forget the little details that separate good research from the ordinary research. Write in such a way that your research can see for themselves the points you are trying to bring out. In other words, provide enough data to enable readers to draw out their own inferences and follow the ones you are making. Your report should be as complete as possible. See feedback on your findings and presentation from your colleagues. Your presentation should be characterized by a balance between the various aspects you have studied, rather than leaning too heavily on one or the other aspect. Your presentation should display accuracy in writing. To check the validity of your research, one of the methods is field research. The very nature of field work is its flexibility and openness, which enables one to study the data in a variety of ways as in field situation. Routine contact with people on day-to-day basis over an extended period of time will help the researcher to test the emerging hypothesis. This method is very sensitive to discrepancies between meaning presumed by investigations and those understood by the target population. So one has to clearly define his or her concept. Defining the concept is also very important for the researcher, as the field is better known to respondent than to the researcher. In a controlled experiment, the situation is other way round, but here the researcher has to work according to the respondent's will. If the researcher is sincere and devoted to his field work and is receptive of the inputs given by the respondents, then his or her research has greater chances of being valid. The validity can also be checked by taking respondents into the confidence and try to involve them into research by the method of discussion. The researcher can share his or her data with the respondents, and while discussing can ensure that there is no discrepancy in what the respondent said and what he or she has written. This method of checking also has its own drawback, as sometimes respondents may deny of what the researcher has written, as they might feel that it shows them in bad light. Here the role of the researcher becomes important, as he or she has to differentiate between the real responses and the released responses. Lincoln and Guava, in their book Naturalistic Inquiries, suggest that for checking the validity of any data, a researcher should adopt few techniques while collecting the data and interacting with the respondent. The researcher should spend more time in the field, which will help the researcher to understand his field and respondents better. Spending more time in the field will also help in the accuracy of the data, as the researcher will be having a clear picture of the field, and it is less likely that the respondent is able to deceive the researcher.